Hi again, thanks for joining me on another video. Today I wanted to talk about soul size and why size matters. And I know that probably sounds a little weird, but I like to think of soul as our own individual piece of the larger energetic puzzle that we are responsible for. I know a lot of people like to think of and speak of Earth as a form of school, and for me, I guess it makes more sense to think of it in terms of a little power plant. But I suppose before you get to the stage where you get to do anything with that kind of power, you need to learn what to do with it and the consequences, right, if you don't do well with it. So it could be a little bit of both. Um, so one of the things that I find really fascinating is how we have so much information in our material world about how energy works, but we often forget to apply it to ourselves and to our understanding of our own spiritual nature. We can become very reductionist in our understanding of, um, I guess, the biological processes and just like material reality, and forgetting all of the energy that goes into the growing of a thing that we eventually see. So, seeds eventually turn into a tree. We can recognize the seed and we can recognize the tree, but we often forget all of the energy, the sunlight, the water, the complete cycle of weather that creates that tree into something. And I think if we could remember to think in those ways with regards to our soul, it could be really helpful and beneficial. I know a lot of times because my channel is focused on people who have been living in poverty and are struggling with understanding or coming to terms with their own enlightenment or how to even go about it. And one of the things that I would encourage you, and I've had to really look deeply at, is separating out um, how we understand money as energy in our economy for some form of representation of how energy is distributed in our society to accomplish things versus energy that is more spiritual in nature. They're a different kind of energy and they can accomplish different kinds of goals. And so I'm talking about spiritual energy and soul energy. So the sun feeds our life energy and gives life to plants, which give life to our bodies, and that's the cycle of energy that I'm talking about. And it helps if you can separate a little bit all of the energy or all of the uh, actions and behaviors that we engage in order to grow our money energy, and make sure that we're spending time growing our soul energy, which can manifest very different types of things into the world. Um, and that's where I'm trying to like separate, um, make the division between the two, if that makes sense. So there's a few things to look at when we're talking about that kind of energy, spiritual energy, how to grow it, how to make it bigger, why it matters. Um, so let's start with the negative stuff. Let's say that you had trauma in your childhood or some bad stuff happened. What can happen is it was so traumatic that you're literally feeding the memory of it with your current energy that you need, for your current needs. Part of that is going to feed a memory that could have happened 15 years ago. So there will be an emotional charge, which is a little bit of energy, and then you'll notice you can play those loops over and over and get more magnetic energy every time your emotional response engages with it. That time period of your life that is spent, let's say you do that 10 minutes a day, that's 10 minutes that you're not taking in nourishment for current needs, energetic needs, emotional needs. And then if you're not even engaging in current stuff, you're certainly not going to be engaging in future stuff, right? Or soul level stuff. So it's things like that. Another thing that you might be feeding energy into is bad relationships. Relationships that are repetitive patterns, or rather than a memory of a specific events that you're keeping charged, it's a pattern. You learned a pattern as a child, or maybe from a movie or from TV or some form of input, and you are recreating this, trying to almost on a subconscious level understand it. And a tremendous amount of our energy will go into habitual patterns of relationship that aren't really beneficial to ourselves or our future selves, for sure. And then the third thing is the physical needs and the physical energy of, if your body needs a certain amount of energy to maintain health, and if the majority of the things that you are taking in are toxic and unhealthy, then more energy is going to clean out rather than build up healthy cells. And after a while, it just gets to be too much, and you literally don't have enough electricity, amplitude in your body to maintain health. And if you don't have some basic level of health, it's really hard to grow any sort of spiritual energy that can actually manifest things into the world for you. So if you, let's say that you decided that you wanted to get a new career, and the career was something that took like 5 years of school, and you made this declaration and you started this path towards that, and tons of energy is going towards this thing that maybe it wasn't even something you really wanted to do, so you don't have an energetic, emotional charge attached to it, but you're still working towards it. So that's like an energy deficit. It's based strictly on your will, which is a little bit harder to maintain. It takes a different form of kind of soul level energy. And if you aren't purposely feeding your soul level energy, it can get depleted really quickly. So those are some of the more negative ways that those things can happen and drain you. And so you really need to be cautious about habitual patterns in relationships where you're just repeating things, spending a whole lot of energy repeating patterns in relationships that you've observed, a whole lot of energy spent towards goals that aren't necessarily your soul gifts trying to come out. And so you have to use like will and discipline in a way that is almost out of sync and unnatural with your, if you had a love and a joy towards it, there would be a natural fountain of energy feeding your actions and behaviors towards that. And then the other thing is getting drained by past memories that you keep fresh and alive in your mind, largely because you don't want to be suddenly caught unaware and put in the same position. But you don't need to keep those in a mental space, and you don't need to feed them with an energetic, emotional reaction. Your body's going to remember when the time comes, so you really can't clear that. If you're afraid that it could happen to someone else, write it down in a notebook and ask for it to be recorded in the Akash as something that could happen. There are some ways, if you have a really good therapist that you trust, or a good friend or somebody that you trust, to record what happened to you, so that you know that you haven't just noticed a horrible event happen and didn't warn anyone else. Sometimes we keep these things alive in order to be able to warn everyone else of them. And you have to give yourself permission that you did that job already in some form or fashion, and you can let it go so that you can call your energy back into your current and now situation. And from that point, what you need to do is start building up more energy. Once you call it back from the places that it's not serving you to be feeding anymore, then you need to grow it into a future for your own use and your own benefit. One of the things I like to I guess ways to understand this is that if you've ever heard someone say, oh, you create your own reality and you can manifest things into the world, and before you could ever manifest anything into the world, you have to have enough energy to sustain it. You have to have enough energy to sustain the thought, even, of the thing that you want. And if it's pulled in all these different directions and you literally don't feel good enough, if you've ever heard, raise your vibrations. If you don't feel good enough, you can't, that's not going to work for you. You have to do things a little bit different, one step at a time. Disconnect from the things that are draining you. Think of it in terms of, if you've ever heard of like a leaky gut, right? You have to really contain your auric field, the field of energy around you that just comes off of you, because you are an electromagnetic being, an electromagnetic planet, an electromagnetic universe. That is just where we're at right now. There could be other forms of universes in the vast field of consciousness that we are a part of, but that's what this is. So we don't want our energy being drained into places. We got to pull that back in, and then you engage in things like really clean and healthy eating. There are actually ways to eat so that it increases your energetic capacity, your electrical field within yourself. Healthy plant foods. That doesn't mean that you have to only eat plant foods, because they're, especially if you have trauma, sometimes the inertial, the foods that create a little bit of density and inertia are really helpful. You don't want to go from 0 to 60 in spirituality when you have a bunch of trauma, because it can make it like almost come back to life. And so you just have to be a little bit more patient and cautious, and be careful that you don't try to follow someone's advice in terms of spiritual, growing your soul energy, that isn't being cautious about what happens if you've had trauma, because that is a way that certain kinds of negative experiences can happen with like a Kundalini awakening, and it's tipping into something that looks more like a spiritual emergency or psychosis. You do not want to feed the energy of negative memories and thoughts. So you have to do some of that clearing first, get enough energy so that you can do that. And then you're getting in good nutrition, soul, happy, positive vibe, feeding your spirit kind of energy, things that calm you, things that make you feel good about being alive and about the future, to balance out all of the negative that you're cutting out. And in that process of getting rid of the things that you don't want to be feeding your energy to, and bringing in nourishing, healthy, happy, soul-growing energy, from that space of peace and bliss, you can think about what you want to actually manifest from a pure place that isn't a reaction to some of the negative stuff. And that's where things really change and can get quite beautiful, and we can work with other people, because we can actually have united goals together of like really beautiful potential for everybody, because it's not feeding a kind of more self-centered goal. Not that all self-centered goals are bad, so don't get me wrong on that one. But you have to have enough space and clarity of your own soul growth in order to combine with other people and a united kind of future goal. So hopefully all of that quick talking and rambling actually made some sense to you. But I think size matters. If we're going to manifest things into the material realm, we have to have enough energy to do so. And it is possible to grow your soul and your spiritual energy. And one of the ways to do that is clear out the bad, seal off any tears in your energetic field, and then take in whatever your soul craves as a positive growth, whether that be through for some people that's devotion and singing and dancing, for some people that is nature, for some people it's reading, all of the philosophy and ancient texts and learning as much as they can. For some people, it's just meditation. And what I would encourage is no matter which path you choose amongst those, and it will probably be a combination of all of them, make sure that you're taking time every day to quietly sit and just breathe. Getting your breathing regulated is one of the most important things, especially if you've had trauma in your past and just the way that the world is right now. Really being able to tune in and regulate your breathing has one of the biggest impacts on how your spiritual energy is used, so that it's not used reactionary, but you have just a little bit of time to decide whether or not you're going to actually have an emotional charge that feeds something maybe you don't want to feed. So, okay, well, thank you for joining me today. And if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to leave them below. Otherwise, we'll see you next time. Thanks.